within jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy podcast, the show that lifts the lid off the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, and puts it into the arena of geopolitics. You know, what does it really mean? How do these elements function in the real world? And what do the real world effects have on these particular areas? We've shown in the past that it's been very eclectic. We have many people on from different genres, different types of life, different things that they do in the world, just to show how they all interconnect with the secret world in some way, even though people don't know it. So this is actually season 4, believe it or not. Last week you had the sort of breakdown of what we did in season 3, and I was with Dan, the engineer man, and today I've got Jade on. Now, what Jade's big skill is actually sitting and watching TV, movies and stuff like that. And one of the things that a lot of people ask is, how realistic are the portrayals of individuals, particularly the police or spies, government agents, governments even? Is it something that we need to work on in these films and movies? Or is it just acceptable? Is there a consequence of it being incorrect? Jade, thanks very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So basically, you said you had some questions regarding this type of thing. What are the questions?
Well, like you said, Carlton, I do watch a lot of TV, and some things I'm a little bit unsure on. So, for example, with EastEnders and some of your soaps, it's quite obvious that that's not how the police force works. You've got the same, I guess, is it normal PC officer that's knocking on the same door every single time.
Absolutely.
And just investigates every single murder and every single case. But your more realistic shows, you know, your Netflix shows, things like at the minute I've been watching Top Boy. I've just finished that. And the police are involved in that. I just wanted to know how realistic it actually is.
Right, so what I'll say is, with Top Boy, I haven't watched all of it. I've watched quite a bit of it, and I watched the previous seasons, and I watched practically 3/4 of this season. I don't want to spoil for anybody who hasn't watched it, because it's brilliant. Yes, I've got a question with the policing. It's all a little bit strong in some areas, but I can see how they're doing it. When I say strong, let me give you an example. There's one scene, and I don't want to stop anybody who's watching it because it's great. There's one scene where they smash the window in a car, and they kind of ask the people to come out of the vehicle. That's all good, but what people need to understand is when police do things, there's a consequence for their actions. So when they smash that window, because they're not coming out of the car, yeah. And I know this Top Boy's kind of set up for America as well, because the Americans, Drake and that, they put the money into it. So they want an American vibe to it. And I guess if you're sitting in a car in the United States and the police tell you to get out and you start moving your hands around, they're not only just going to smash the window, you might end up getting shot dead. So when these guys are doing that, I guess the Americans are probably sitting there thinking, hold on, these people are bad-mouthing the police and you know, not coming out of the car when they're told to, and nobody's getting shot because, you know, these are potential criminals. So there's that aspect. But in Britain, it's completely different. So
you say they would have actually smashed the window? That could have happened?
It could happen if, and this is the point that I'm making, if, example, there is good intelligence to suggest that inside that vehicle there are problems. So loading drugs, let's say, definitely firearms, weapons, knives even, and the individuals are potentially going out to carry out some dangerous action. Then, working on intelligence, they may well smash that window if the guy doesn't, and I think it was a guy or was a girl in this case anyway, didn't get out of the vehicle straight away. It could happen. But they'd have to explain why they've done it, what happens, how the people can get their money back for the window.
Yeah.
They'd have to turn around and say, well, you can now claim on this, and this is a form we're going to sign out for you, and a whole load of hassle. So the reality is, cops don't just break windows without thinking, what's the consequence going to be for me? Because the other thing you need to understand, particularly in Britain, I suggest to you that the average senior officer is not supporting their men and women that much. They're not. They're looking after themselves. They're covering their own backs, if you will.
Right.
So officers making mistakes, so like that child queue mistake.
Yes, yeah.
Right? Straight away, you see with the child queue, which was a stupid thing to have done, and strip searched a girl, 15 I think she was, a very stupid thing to do. But notice that the education system defended its people and put it all down to the police, even though the teachers were saying, "Oh, that girl's definitely got something on her. I've seen her. She's bad. She's this. She's that. The other." And the stupid officers, after doing a basic search, went that step further and did a strip search. If you were going to think you're going to do a strip search, you take it back to the police station.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because you'd have a reason for doing it. If there isn't that reason, take it back to the police station. And the truth of the matter is, if you think she's just got a little bit of cannabis on her, there's no way in the world you're going to strip search a person. Right? Because why? But anyway, if they felt so strongly that there was more to it, you would get the appropriate adults or the person's mother or whatever it was, and take them back to the police station and do all that sort of stuff there. You wouldn't be doing a proper strip search. Now, removing outer clothing, I can see that. You can do that in a place that's not next to the public. You'd obviously have a female officer do it because she was female, and the way it would go like that. But to do a strip search without doing that in the station? What I understand is that because the teacher was so adamant that the girl had something on her, they were swayed by the teacher, right?
Okay.
Now, and a senior teacher as well. So now, but the first thing that the teaching system does is defend that teacher. But not one police senior officer has defended the police officers. That's the big difference. So every officer with any modicum of common sense knows that they're in the game by themselves.
Yeah.
Frankly. So that's where you begin to fall down. So, yeah, that could have happened, breaking the window.
But obviously for
Dramatic
purposes,
of drama.
For drama, they're not going to put in somebody filling out a form to say, I need my window fixing, or...
What I think they could have said is, though, if you want to report the window, because actually, they probably wouldn't, but if you want to report the window, here's my number, this is who I am, this is the search for, this is the form we've done for the stop and the section 60, bang, 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 and passed it to them. They could then do that. Frankly, they should have body-worn cam, they should have put the body-worn camera on and shown what was going down anyway. Right, because officers today have got body-worn cameras, so you could see the action, what was going on. But they haven't done that. Now, does that take away from the drama if you see the officer say, switch your camera on, let's see what's happening? One officer saying to another, smashing the window. Does that take away the drama? I don't know if it does. If you do it right. Why would it? But anyway, that's what happens. But what I think the problem is, and you mentioned it very well right in the beginning, you spoke about the soaps.
Yeah. People
who watch these soaps often think they're real.
Yeah, I think that people believe what they see on the TV.
Right. So when this officer... so if you watch EastEnders example, what does he call... Is it Ben? Ben's husband?
Yeah.
This guy, from the day he's been in, has been the most corrupt guy you can see. And nothing's happened to him. You had another corrupt officer telling him what to do, supposedly some sort of undercover... without signing any forms off, without filling anything in, without the guy being any kind of being put into it in any process that's realistic. because it's got to be realistic, without saying what you're trying to achieve, without going to, because it's criminal, you know, it might be different in a different context, say it was a political context, but a criminal context, without actually understanding why you do it, without it being authorised from the top. All of these things haven't happened, and Ben's husband, I forget his name, is out there doing all this so-called work, and then 9 times out of 10, I'll find that out for you, and I'll find this out for you, as though he's a centre of police investigations.
It's like Craig on Coronation Street.
Even worse. Craig on Coronation Street, just come out of the job. Next minute, he's knowing everything, my mate in CSI is doing this, or my mate can tell me this, or I can do that. I mean, it just doesn't work like that. The system is quite rigid in many ways, and people fear about losing their jobs. Now, what I will say is this. I don't know if you know that old series they call The Sweeney.
I've heard of
Jack Regan, Carlton, and all that.
Way before my time.
Absolutely, because it's like way back in the 70s. Now, they are doing things on there that were probably right in the 70s. Okay? Before there was a thing called the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, you know, Jack Regan from the Flying Squad, which is a central unit in the Met, in Scotland Yard, dealing with armed robberies. So quite a bit of latitude in those days. A lot of armed robberies were going down. They wanted to prevent these armed robberies. It was much more robust. The public had a greater belief in the police. So frankly, they were nigh on doing many things that they wanted to do in those days within the law, because there was nothing preventing them from doing it. So that stuff, and taking account, that's like 50 years ago. So that stuff 50 years ago, which could have been right then, and probably was, not could have been, because I spoke with guys from that period, was realistic then, is absolutely not realistic. But we have the view that somehow police are worse than they were 50 years ago. It's not the case. Police were way worse 50 years ago than they are today. Because today there's massive rigid controls on officers about how they do things. In those days, 50 years ago, guys were doing, gals were doing nigh on what they wanted to. You know, you'll see it in Jack Regan, he'll say, Skip, hold this fella for me, Sergeant. Hold this fella in the cell for me for a couple of days and I'll come back and see him later on. And that doesn't happen now. All that's controlled. No. You know, you have a controlled system of how long you can hold people for, why you can hold people for. The assessments that have to go on 6 hours, 5, 8 hours. All these assessments have to take to a magistrate. All this stuff has to go on. So it's completely different, but it's not shown in these programmes. My question to you is this. One, is it more entertaining the fact it looks a bit, let's say, a bit Wild Westish? Do you find it more entertaining that way? That's the first question I'd have for you. But secondly, this is my other question to you, would be, do you think that what that does then is it makes people think the police actually function that way and they're actually bad at what they do?
So I absolutely do think that people believe that the police function that way. Right, let me give you an example. So, Call of Duty.
Yep.
I love that show. I love that show. And I feel like they seem to have a lot of different things in place. They're doing anti-corruption. They seem to have, I don't know, a lot of things in place to try and stop these bad cops. So there seems to be a lot of bad cops there. Well,
in Call of Duty, I don't know an officer who isn't corrupt.
Yeah.
If you think about it. Now, as you know, because I advertised it last week, I'm getting Ashley on board. So Ashley Walters, who plays in Top Boy, I'm getting on board. But the other person who I was getting on board and I had spoken with was one of the stars from Call of Duty. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say anything. Hopefully she was going to come on board on the show. And that was one of the questions I wanted to ask. Do they think that how they portray the police actually has a negative perspective on how people think about them? Because they're meant to be in the anti-corruption unit, right? However, from the chief down, in the anti-corruption unit, they're all corrupt.
Yeah.
Every one of them. There's not one single one who is not corrupt. I've not seen an uncorrupt police officer in that unit. Now, Jed Mercurio, who writes this programme, seems to suggest that that's the way policing is. I think he thinks that's for real, because I saw one of his tweets on some video saying, as I said in Line of Duty. Well, no, it's nothing like that.
Right,
nothing like that whatsoever.
See, I would have thought that not obviously necessarily all of it, but quite a lot of the police aspects of the policing were quite true to life.
Right, what I'd tell you is this. You know when you see them, so they arrest, I think, was it the series before, when you had the female police officer who, senior officer, I think she's a detective inspector, or detective chief inspector. She was basically one of the bad people in the unit, one of the leading people in the unit, who might have been that individual that they looked to, the caddy, whatever he was. But it wasn't her. Anyway, she was questioned, brought into the police station. Now, 3 things I'll tell you from that, which made me laugh out loud. One was, they brought her into the police station, but they didn't bring her into a police station. They brought her into an office, which is part of the anti-corruption office, and not the police station. So why is she being questioned in an office when she should be questioned in the police station? That's number one,
okay.
right? Not in just some office. That's not how it works. Secondly, when they started saying, we can show you this, we can show you that, we can show you whatever, it's as though they have unlimited resources for analysts. I mean, their analysts must work 24 hours a day, every day, and there must be 15,000 of them, gaining information within seconds. So do you know how long it takes, example, to go through a mobile phone? The amount of data on a mobile phone. They've gone through the mobile phone, they find everything out within 2 seconds. Now, you could time-lapse that and say, we're bringing you back 3 weeks later, and, or even 5 weeks later, or even a month later. You do not go through phones like that. It's just not doable. Okay. You do not go through hard drives like that. There's tons of data on a hard drive. So even if you're using algorithms, it's still very, very difficult to pick up the information that you want. So that's the first thing. Everything's they have statements all written out, again, seemingly without doing anything. Now, what angers me is this, that there's a plethora of programmes on television showing you how police actually work.
Yeah.
Day in, day out, they're all on. I don't know, police officers in the Northwest, I think one's called, Greater Manchester Force, the Met Force had one. What was the other one?
24 Hours of
24. Yeah, brilliant, great show. That's showing you exactly how it works. You see how long it takes for them to do things. You see. Now, they're meant to be in a small force in Line of Duty.
Right, okay.
They've got armed officers all over the place.
Yeah.
Do you know how many armed officers are in the general police force? In a general police force, it's only about general force outside the Met is about 3% of officers to 4% maximum. So 96 to 97% of officers cannot carry a firearm. Okay. These have everybody carrying weapons all over the place. Secondly, most people, if they were, because I know that the lead female actress played one role where she was running after somebody with a G36. Well, if she was a firearms officer at one stage, why is she keeping up her firearms when she's in CID and been in it for years? Because as a general rule now, that's not what happens, because you've got to keep training them, right? And she isn't doing the training because she's not working with firearms all the time. So that will have lapsed. So there is no way that she's getting... Next minute there was one where, you can just get the firearm out, sign off. Well, hang on, this bloke hasn't had a firearm for 5 years.
Yeah.
So there's all things like that, which just firearm, by that I mean a gun, that just don't work. It's not real.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is, I think, this is my belief, I think we try and copy American programs.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think definitely.
Yeah.
Because, and this is another question I was going to ask. So a lot of the box sets that I've been watching are American. So yep. I don't know how you stand in that and if you know how that works. So, for example, Power.
Yep.
Queen of the South. I've just finished watching Queen of the South.
Yeah, very good.
What I wanted to know, not just from how the police work's point of view, but all the crimes that are being committed, these people don't seem to be getting in any trouble for them. So they're killing people left, right and centre as part of different drug cartels, but never really once have the police come. And if they have, they've always managed to pay them off.
Right.
You know, they've got them in their pocket.
You mean the criminal? Yeah,
the criminals, yeah.
Right. Okay. So, right. I've worked probably in 3/4 of the country of the world with police, particularly on protection duties, and I've carried a firearm in most of those countries. They have their regulations for you carrying. What I should say is the vast majorities of countries in the world, all officers carry weapons. So when you hear them say, "Oh, we got armed police doing this," they're not saying armed police because every cop is carrying. It's only like Britain. In ERA, in Southern Ireland, the average officer doesn't carry, but all the CID carry. Okay. So this is kind of a strange thing. The CID all carry, but the general uniformed officers don't. Although they have teams that do, like armed response vehicles, like we have them. As I said, in the Met here in this country, it's basically about 94% of officers do not carry in the Met, and as I said, in the normal other forces, because you need to understand there's 43 different police forces in England and Wales, and now one in Scotland and one in Northern Ireland. So those other 42 forces don't carry on to the extent of, as I said before, 97%, 98% don't carry. So your armed officers are few and far between and are called to do jobs and are hence very professional. Now, in other countries, all officers are carrying, but they do have the special weapons and tactics team above and beyond the average officers. In Northern Ireland, by the way, all officers carry. So all police officers carry, which is a part of the United Kingdom, but every police officer carries. But the reality is that more people, there's more firearms crime in London than there is in Northern Ireland. Now, every police officer carries in Northern Ireland, but in London there's more firearms offences. Yeah. So that's another thing you've got to understand. Now, around the different parts of the world, so America, let's take the United States, there's something like, what was the last time I looked, 28,000 different police forces and stuff.
Right, yeah.
It's an incredible amount. Yeah. Some of them 2 dogs, 2 men and a dog.
Yeah.
And some of them then obviously like NYPD and then there's federal agencies, state agencies, so federal like the FBI.
Yeah.
Then there's state like the Georgia Bureau of Special Investigation. And then there's other units like which also function within it, like State Department Security Service, but functions within the country. Okay. Alcohol, tobacco and firearms function. So there's different agencies doing a lot of different things. So when you're talking about your major drugs dealers, it could be agencies that are doing different things. That are federal agencies, not just local police agencies. So there's that. Clearly, there is much more firearms use. Yeah. And police seem to get away with killing people, and I'm saying this now, unnecessarily. And I know I got people in the United States who listen to me, but I've got to say there seems to be an unnecessary use of force on individuals with multiple shots. So in Britain, an officer, draw his weapon if he is one of those 3%, 4% using that weapon, or 6% in say the Met, using that weapon. But what he or she knows, so I used to carry here in the United Kingdom all the time, what I know is if I shoot somebody, I've got to account for every round I shoot. So if I shoot somebody once, for whatever reason, because he's a threat, I've got to then say, is that person still a threat before I shoot twice? And is he still a threat before I shoot 3 times? Right? Because if not, they're going to say to me, right, the first shot might have been good, but the second shot, you're up for murder. Right? Okay. Because you decapitated, you prevented the fellow from moving, he was no longer a threat. So why are you still shooting him? Yeah. Right? And definitely if he's running away. If the guy's running away and his back's to you and you shoot him in the back, they're going to say to you, why have you shot this fellow in the back?
I've seen all these videos.
Tell me why have you shot a fellow in the back who's running away? Now, your argument might be because he was turning around to come and shoot me, right? Because he was then turning. But you're going to have to prove that. There's no way you are not going to be in the Old Bailey, which is our top court, sitting looking for your life as to whether you go to prison, right? So the consequences are very, very stark in this country of you shooting people as a police officer. right? So, whereas in many US places, I'm not saying all, so example, I know the FBI is very capable, and as a general rule, it's a capable service, and as a general rule, they're very circumspect. I know the ATF, as a general rule, is, I've worked with some of these marshal service, seems to be very capable. I've worked with these services with them. Some other forces I see as maybe less. I see as people just shooting folk. Frankly, I just think, why are these guys not in prison?
Yeah.
No, I mean,
definitely.
how does that happen? And then forget the shooting of them, strangling people and all sorts of different stuff, like all this sort of stuff going on, which you just can't justify in the United Kingdom. So that's the difference. But that makes for better TV, doesn't it? Because you can see that that's now potentially realistic, because you see it happening and you see the officers getting away with it. So television-wise, they can put that in there and it's realistic. When they try and copy that in the UK, it's not realistic.
It's not, yeah.
That's the point I'm making. And if you tried to copy that, let's say, in Germany, it wouldn't be realistic. In Norway, it wouldn't be realistic. In, we could go through a whole lot of countries that I've been to, and you just say, it's not realistic. You would not do that. It just would not happen.
Yeah.
Right, so that's the big difference, I would say. So...
In terms of them getting away with their crimes, though, so a lot of the gangs killing one another and stuff. Why, is that happening? Are they getting away with it?
I think so.
So they're running around the streets, shooting one another.
Right. Yeah, because of the volume of crime.
Right, okay.
Right, so if you look at something like, I'll tell you one that I like watching, is it called First 48? First 48.
Yes,
Have you seen that?
I think I've actually seen a couple of them, yeah.
You will see that First 48
that's
goes
real,
in, it's real,
yeah.
It is fly on the wall as it is. You will see officers doing investigations, and when they're doing the investigation, there's 3 or 4 officers doing an investigation into a shooting. Some person's been murdered, and there's 3 or 4 officers. They're doing it, and the 3 or 4 officers look at it. They bring a suspect in, and I just can't understand it. Invariably, the suspect comes in, sits down, lies down like it's just, I don't know, like he's been shopping for a day when they're talking to him. He's not there taking it seriously, and he has no lawyer. I mean, I just think, so you want to lawyer up? Then they say, okay, you lawyer up, now practically, if you are looking at somebody in the United Kingdom who is sitting in whilst being questioned for an offence that is murder, and by the way, they've got capital offences, which means you can be executed for your offence, right? Which you can't in the United Kingdom, of course. And when we say life in the UK, you can get life. That's like 14 years, okay? And it's never really life, often, right? So, but they can say life, and it's like 100 years, and it means 100 years, right? So you would think that everybody who was up there would have a lawyer with them, a solicitor, to defend them. They don't. And I just can't understand that. So first and foremost, the detectives are dealing with an easier thing in some ways, right? So they look always for a person to say, "For cop gov, I've done it." Obviously in American, I've done it, put their hands up, whatever the American version is of "For cop governor, I've done it," right? So looking for confessions 9 times out of 10, it appears to me. And somehow, they get these confessions. I can't understand. Whereas in Britain, the average guy who's going to shoot somebody is going to sit down and say, "No comment."
Yeah. And
that's it. So it's up to you to prove it. And you're going to wheel out, "Well, on this and this date, did you do anything?" No comment. No comment. No comment. And the lawyer's going to turn around and say, "My client has said," and this is for a guy who's got no money.
Yeah.
Right, because he gets
a duty
slip. And duty solicitor says, "Say no comment, mate." And if the police officer says, "My client has said no comment," and he's going to say no comment all the way through. Right? And that's what it's going to be. Right? So that's the big difference. Now, the other thing is, we are, I believe, much more professional on the forensics. So you're not going to have somebody shot dead like that without a whole team doing the forensic investigation. You're going to have 10, 12 people doing a forensic investigation.
But I guess if it's really frequent, have they got time to be doing it?
That's the problem.
If they're coming in
There's no detective walking across that scene without full protective padding on.
Yeah.
You're not going to take him into... see, if it's a gunshot, residue, right? What they've kind of tried to say in ours is, don't let any armed officer, and there are very few of them, come next to the fella because that could cross-contaminate the fact that you've got it, because there's gunshot residue could have come from the officer. There, everybody's carrying. So the officer's just walking around the scene, and then you can say, oh, this bloke had gunshot residue on his hands. So what? I may have touched an officer who's had gunshot residue on him.
Yeah. Okay.
So see what I'm saying? But they don't use that. It's never used. I just don't understand it. It's never used. It seems to be me as, unless you've got a lot of money and you can get a good lawyer and then you get off. If you haven't, I think you kind of struggle there. You know, and as I say, it's 2 or 3 guys doing the investigation. If they don't catch it early, as they say, within the first 48, then it's sitting there without them really, because what's the next crime? I saw one, Chicago, one weekend, there's something like 20 people shot dead, and another, I don't know, something stupid like 70 odd injured from shootings.
I saw Reggie Yates at a programme.
I mean, this is just craziness. I mean, so yes, and that's every weekend. It's not like just a one-off, you know. So I guess these people are thinking, well, how am I keeping these cases running? So it's very few detectives looking at these issues, which prevents them from, I believe, doing the best job they can. So when we come back to drama, what you then find is the people writing the drama have got to think to themselves, right, so this is The Wire, example, or Queen of the South, or what did you say the other one in New York? Power. Example in New York City. This is Power. I'm going to tell you something about New York soon. Remind me, because I'll tell you. So about New York City, they're thinking, well, how can we compete with that drama if we don't put drama in ours in the same way?
Right, okay. So,
Did you see what I mean? This is how we are doing it. How now, when you watch German TV, and I watch quite a bit of it, or Spanish TV, a bit less, but still watch some, they're not trying to copy that drama, it seems. Now, maybe it's because, they do have American programmes because they dub them into German. But I think the German people know this is how our police are functioning. Yes, they have weapons and they can pull their gun out and whatever, but 9 times out of 10 they're not. And the drama shows it that way. Yeah,
because I do think that in Britain we confuse our police forces a lot with how the American police forces work. So when people are saying, you stopped me because I look a certain way and things like that, because of everything that happened in America, then straight away that same thing starts to be, everyone's watched it on social media and then they start saying the same thing about in this country.
Absolutely.
But realistically, the police aren't shooting dead people in this country.
Absolutely. It's nowhere near the same, is it? I mean, what was the figures I saw? Was it, I don't want to get it wrong, was it 20? Was it something like either 14,000 or 20,000? I'll look it up. Killed by police.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, it's
terrible.
just an incredible figure. I mean, just literally incredible. I'll look that up because I'm not sure what that was over a certain period of time. So I don't want to give false figures. So that's a lot of death. What UK? It's probably about per year. Probably about. This is the other thing. Death in police custody. Right, so a death in police custody can be you as a police officer, right, arrest somebody, right, so the person's arrested, or you as a police officer are called to an individual who's got mental health problems and is in the street fighting with people or sharing with people or whatever it might be, and the police take them into custody, hand them over to the health service, and they're put into let's say a secure facility unit for the police for the people there. Now, what happens is that if that person dies within a relatively short period thereafter, then basically what it means is that person has died within police custody still. So you could be transporting the person in an ambulance to that facility, but the police are said to be the ones whose custody you were in.
Oh, I see.
So or let me give you another one. A vagrant example is outside, and a police officer stops, speaks to the individual, looks at them. They don't look 100% right, but then says, "You sure you're okay, mate? Yeah. Sure, I'm all right. Yeah, okay." Walks back and leaves, and the fella then dies thereafter. That's in police custody. Because
so it's
you've
not
had interaction with police.
at the hands of the police.
You've had interaction with the police.
Okay.
Now, in the US, as I said, the difference is that when they're talking about, and I'm just talking about police shootings now, which we were talking about a bit earlier on, so you've actually drawn your weapon, you've actually shot people, and I say it was 20,000 over the 20 years. It's right. So I just wanted to look up the figures. So in 2021, there were 1,055 fatal police shootings. So that's fatal. So how many were not fatal? And in 2020, there was 1,021 fatal police shootings. So how many were not fatal? Because you've got to look at medical care now. Medical care is superb, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But one of the things I do see with US police is when people are shot, they don't automatically go to first aid. Now, in Britain, what happens is if you were to shoot somebody, even me, say I'm protecting the Prime Minister, and I shoot this person, right, because he's trying to assassinate the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And I've got me and my team with me because I'm in charge of the team and they're there. What I'd have to do is, I'd have to get the Prime Minister out of the way because that could just be a one-off and there could be other people setting him up. But I'm also having to try and say to somebody, check that fella, make sure he's okay while I take the rest of my team and move him away. So somebody's going to have to look after that fella who's been shot. Okay. And the police are going to do first aid on that fella. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, because if not, they're going to say, well, you just let a fella die for no reason. Yeah. Now, my argument would be is, look, I'm doing protection of the Prime Minister and I don't know if he's just the only guy there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I could argue my way out of it, but if I knew I had enough people to defend that against that, I'd really have to assign some people, on the radio. Check that fella down, whatever, while I get the PM out of the way. If not, then I'd have to have other units to come in and check the fella, make sure he's all right. So there's a much greater protective element towards it. Now, I said I'd speak about New York. Now, when I was in Iraq, just before the end of the war fighting zone back in 2003, so we'd invaded the United States, Britain and others had invaded Iraq, was I had to try and get a minister into Baghdad to get the spoils of war, because all wars are fought for what you can get out of them, the spoils of war. So I went in with a team of guys, myself, I took several guys, not that many actually, to look at how we could do it, to look at how we could keep the minister alive and look at the threats that were against us. So I hooked up with the guy who was nominally the head of the Iraqi police, Iraqi security service, and basically acted as an interior minister for Iraq. And it was this guy, Bernie Kerik, who was the ex-commissioner of the New York Police. And New York Police, is a very big police force, like 80,000 people, whatever, when you put them all together. So I got talking to him, and he and I got on like a house on fire. He was a brilliant guy. So he starts talking about there's some people that walk the walk, and others talk the talk, and others walk the walk. He says, I can tell, Carlton, you're the guy who you're going to walk the walk. He talks like he's basically like a mafia gangster guy. He's got that Italian sort of, Bernie, he's a great guy, he's a funny guy, Yeah. So he starts telling me a story about how he became the commissioner of New York Police. He said, you've got to be intellectual, and I can see you're an intellectual guy, so you've got to have that intellectual, but you've also got to have the street. He said, so I used to ride with people, he said. This is what he said to me. I used to ride with people who'd done a shooting. And I'd get 4 or 5 guys who'd done a shooting, and I'd sit down and ride with them, because I know you can trust those guys, because they've done a shooting. So, all right, okay. So then he told me about the time when before he was in the Commissioner of New York, he was head of Rikers Island, which is a big prison they got there in New York.
Okay, yeah, I know.
And he was the guy who basically got a lot of intelligence about drug dealing. So the DEA came to him and said, listen, do you want to work on a task force with me? as a DEA, like a federal agent. And he said, yeah. So he was telling me this great seizure that he had. And he said, so we had this guy, this Colombian guy, he said, and he was going to go to Switzerland. He said, you ever worked in Switzerland? They ain't shit. I said, well, I have worked in Switzerland as it happens. And I wouldn't say that they're not, bad guys. I'd just say that they do have some problems in trying to get things done, particularly in the banking world. He said, yeah, well, I can tell you that. And then he started telling me a story about how they were in search of this particular individual who was a big Colombian drugs dealer. And he knew where he was, he knew the hotel that he was in, and he'd actually brought one of his New York guys with him, and I'll give him the name of Gino, I don't know what he was called. And he said, he says, you got to have guys you can trust. You know that? Because you can trust guys, you can do everything. I said, oh, right, brilliant. He said, so he was a shooter. Right, so he told me he was a shooter. I said, oh, okay, fair enough, Gino. He said, and he said, we knew where this guy was going to be. And what had happened is, he said, we were able to set out where this guy was going to be, and then our people in the Legat, you know the Legat? I said, yeah, an FBI legal attaché who's attached to most embassies. He said, yeah, that's it. The Legat had asked for him to be extradited, and the Swiss, they said no, because this guy had put multi-millions of dollars in their bank, and they said no, they wouldn't extradite him. So I went to the hotel with Gino, and I said, Gino, soon there's going to be a guy who's going to walk down those steps. And when he walks down those steps, I want you to walk over to him and F him up. And I mean bad. I mean break up his teeth, break up his nose, break up everything. I said, I want you to put this guy down. And Gino said, okay, boss. So this guy came down as bold as bass. He's got two women on his arms, one on one arm, one on the other. And Gino walked up and he went, pow, pow, pow. And he kicked the out of him. Right? And I'm not saying the words that he was using. He says he kicked that out of him. And then I said, okay, Gino, you get on the next plane back to the world, to the United States. So Gino went off. He says, you know why I did that? I said, no, I don't, Bernie, actually. He said, because I knew in the 6 weeks it's going to take him, or 10 weeks it's going to take him in hospital, we'd be able to get the paperwork out properly.
Oh,
and get him brought back. So that's the chief. Okay.
Right, okay.
So he was under Rudy Giuliani, who was a good friend of his.
Right.
Right, Rudy Giuliani, who you know very, very recently as the guy who was a lawyer for President Trump.
Okay.
Right. Donald Rumsfeld was also somebody who he knew. And so this is the company Bernie had. And as I said, he got this role as head of Iraqi's police and whatever. Now, our country tried to make me the head of Iraqi special branch to try and counterweight against him. That didn't take it on because I'd say this is, super crazy. I didn't take the role on. I mean, I used to go there all the time, but I knew I'd be hated, so I didn't take the role on. But anyway, cut a long story short, Bernie ended up in prison. In fact, if you've ever seen the program about Khalif Browder.
Yes, in Rikers Island. Yes, I have seen it.
Right, there's a guy who speaks about him, a white guy who says, I was in solitary confinement, I know what it's like. That's Bernie Kerrick.
Oh, okay.
Because what happened to Bernie is, later on, he was then slated to become practically like the Home Secretary of the United States. Okay? And he had that going for him. Now, a lot of people didn't like him, Democrats didn't like him, because of the sort of stuff that he does like that.
Yeah.
And so they looked to try and get him, and they got him on the fact that he'd hired a Mexican woman to do his... that was it, to tidy his house and do everything like that, who was an illegal. And he lied about it. So he got something like, I can't remember what it was, 2-3 years in Rikers Island. So from being the chief of New York police, he ended up in Rikers himself. So oftentimes he was in solitary because otherwise he'd try and kill him.
Yeah.
Because without saying, he was chief and he was in Rikers. So that's Bernie. But he is a nice fellow in some ways, but unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. That's a true story. So you can see how American drama can be
could be
much more
like real life,
hard
yeah.
and tough than ours.
Okay, so from everything we spoke about then, what TV shows or films, but like I said, I love a box set, do you believe are the most true to life?
Okay.
In terms of policing, but not just policing, but what's going on in the show and whether they would get away with what they're doing, or, you know, just what do you think's the most realistic show?
Yeah. I mean, you cannot not say The Wire.
Okay, yeah.
I think The Wire is very realistic. I mean, I didn't work drugs per se. I worked drugs in terms of narco-terrorism, because my area that I worked in was political. So I worked in terms of, you know, Pablo Escobar trying to take over the state. Mm-hmm. That's I worked it that way, but not drugs per se. But the drugs per se street stuff, the guy who writes that is a guy who was a Baltimore detective.
Okay.
So he knew exactly how it worked. Yeah, he knew how it worked. He was 20 or 30 year veteran of Baltimore police. So he's writing how it was. And then he tied in with some of the black guys who were actually doing the street stuff in reality. You know, half the actors in that are real street people.
Yeah, I did hear
in The Wire.
Yeah.
Half of them are real people who were doing the job. So he knew how that worked. And before that, he did a thing called Homicide: Life on the Streets, which again was very, very good, set in Baltimore back in the 90s. And after that, but before The Wire, he did one called The Corner.
I've seen that.
Right,
I have seen The Corner. It was great, yeah.
Super. And all of those in the is what he's done. So he understood how it all functioned.
They seemed, well, I say they're realistic, but then, they
were
seemed
realistic.
very realistic
absolutely,
to me.
Absolutely. And more importantly, and what it showed in that movie is how you bother about a murder that means something.
Oh, absolutely.
I know that takes bad, but it means, is this person somebody you know about? Is this somebody of import? Mm-hmm. No, nobody of import. Try and close it down. Let's look. Yeah, that's how they're working it, unfortunately. So that showed it well. So I'd say that Wire, Homicide, stuff like that. I'd also look at movies like, I mean, in my other field, sort of espionage and stuff like that. I'd say that. I'll tell you what isn't good. Example. Do that as well. I was asked to write for the Telegraph a assessment of Bodyguard. You know, the one that came out about the series Bodyguard.
Oh, not with Keely Hawes.
Yeah, exactly. And I said it's a load of rubbish. Right. Okay. So that's my assessment on that. Purely, and I wrote and explained why in the Telegraph. I mean, purely and simply why were just various issues, many things that were totally and utterly wrong about how they were carried through. So, and I think you could still have a good programme and do it right.
So do not all these programmes use advisors?
Yeah, they do. And I know the advisor who does it on The Bodyguard. I knew the advisor, in fact. I knew him. Oh. But apparently, from what I hear, is he advised and they took no notice.
And they didn't. Okay,
right.
So yeah.
In some areas, but in other areas, he didn't. The guy who did it hadn't that much experience in actually performing protection duties himself.
Right.
So there's various things which weren't right. Espionage-wise, I would say there was one called Berlin Station, which, obviously, it plays around a little bit, but was pretty good.
Okay.
I thought he was going to do a retro one again, which I thought was pretty good, set in Berlin, was called Spy. One that was great was called Spy, which was an Israeli one with... Who's the guy who used to do Ali G?
Oh, Sacha Baron Cohen?
Superb, he played in one. Superb.
Oh, okay. I've not heard of that. Maybe that's on my watch list.
It's great. How he does that is great. You know, it's how it works. If you want to talk about a movie that's very, very good at that, at doing it, the undercover element of that, you need to go no further than Donnie Brasco.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Superb.
That's
superb. Al Pacino and
Johnny Depp, is it?
Not. Yes, Johnny Depp. Sorry.
Yes, Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp and what's he called? You know the guy. Not Robert De Niro. It is Al Pacino. Yeah.
Al Pacino. Yeah.
Brilliant. It's about the mafia, so not an area that I work, but brilliant. Very, very good. You know. So there are some that do it right.
Like I love Homeland.
Homeland, right. In the beginning, how Homeland is done in terms of, I know this is me looking from the organisation from the outside, so it's me working with CIA from the outside. Was never a CIA officer, but I work with enough of them to see that she could represent one.
Okay.
No doubt about that. So I could see how that worked, but how they worked the whole aspect was a little bit wrong in terms of they were doing, FBI work within the CIA. You get what I'm saying?
Right,
So there's different agencies. So there was that. And another one that's good like that is Zero Dark 30.
Never heard of it.
Very good. Watch it. It's about how they get Bin Laden.
Oh, okay.
Very, very good. That was done well. It's about a CIA analyst and how they're doing the work, and that very good. And bits of that I'm familiar with in real life. So for me, I thought there's quite a few areas that are good. It's just that, and I'm allowing for dramatic license on it all. Example, another one that I think is good is, because I told you about Pablo Escobar, is good, Narcos. It is good.
So I didn't actually finish that. I really need to read it.
Narcos is good. Narcos is good. There's another one called 000, set in Mexico.
Okay.
I can see the way that they're doing the things and the breadth and the movement of narcotics and how it functions. That that's the realistic element to it. So there's good things like that. There are good programs. Obviously all of the programs tend to go over the top, but that's programs. I accept that. It's just I just don't like it when it goes too far over the top. When Craig is the only fella doing anything. When the guy in EastEnders is the only fella and nobody's seeing what he's doing. Those are the type of things. When you get somebody saying, "I've been wanting you, Phil, forever and a day, and I'm doing all this," like there's some personal vendetta nonsense. All that sort of stuff is just unrealistic. Things that just don't sit right. But other things like people being, when you're in Coronation Street or whatever, when they put women in prison, left, right, and centre.
Every woman on that street.
Exactly. Half these people.
I think Gail and Sally were in prison at the same time.
Gail would never see a prison under those figures. Gail would definitely not be held on remand. If you're holding people on remand for those sort of cases, you'd have no room in your prisons. It's nonsense. She'd be on bail all day long. So these things like that, which don't make any sense. Plus, the other thing which I think people don't understand is the difference between the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. The police don't prosecute anybody. That's the Crown Prosecution
Absolutely,
Service.
which I've actually learnt recently. I was doing a bit of research on that.
Yeah, police don't prosecute anybody. So what you'll get is they'll say, "Oh, the police didn't do this, they didn't do that." No, the police just say, "This is what we've got," and the Crown Prosecution Service say, "You've not got enough, so we're not charging them. Let him go." And people think it's the police.
Yeah.
Right? People, this is the problem. People don't understand. If people say, "Oh, police aren't doing anything on rapes. People aren't being done for rapes." Well, the police turn around and say, "This is what we've got there." The Crown Prosecution say, "Nah, nothing there. Throw it out." So the police are perceived of throwing it out. It's nothing to do with the police. That's the Crown Prosecution Service.
They put their case forward and the rest is left, isn't it?
Exactly. And more importantly, when all the evidence goes into the court, that's all produced by the police.
Yeah.
Right. So when you hear the Crown Prosecution say, "Oh, we've done a great job, we've done this, that." No, the police have produced all that paperwork.
Yeah.
Not the Crown Prosecution Service, they're just taking it into court. Right? But they don't take a case unless they think they've got a 60-40% chance of winning it. 60-40.
Yeah.
If they think they will lose it, they don't take it. Right? And some cases, even when that is the case, you need the authority of the DPP. Right? And if the DPP, Director for Public Prosecution, says it's not in the public interest to charge, then even if you've got bags of evidence, Cyril Smith example, for paedophilia, there was bags of evidence, and the DPP said no.
Okay.
It's not in the public interest. So right there, your police are stymied. Police can't just say, "Oh, we're doing it anyway." It doesn't look like that.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the judiciary makes those decisions. Yeah, the courts are making those decisions, not the police.
Yeah.
All the police are doing is obtain the evidence for it to go forward.
The general public, I don't think, are aware of that at all.
Don't understand it. You get that case with Lawrence example. They turn around and say, "Oh, Lawrence did that." No, the police had evidence within, what was it, I think I'm right in saying within a month they had evidence saying these are the people who we think it is.
Stephen Lawrence.
It's Stephen Lawrence.
Yeah.
And the DP, and they said not enough evidence.
Okay.
Right, so it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
This is your problem. But that's all down to the police as far as people think. So, I mean, my question to you is, do you think that the way things are portrayed, Miss Marple solving every crime and the police not able to solve crimes, do you think, I'd have solved that in a day, do you think that this actually plays into the fact that people think the police are useless?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, I think that people see something on TV. They also watch a lot of documentaries come forward and say, oh, they had this sort of evidence, exactly like you're saying. There was evidence, but they didn't do anything. They don't understand that isn't the police. And absolutely, I think people think, well, I could have solved this case. I could have done this. I could have done that. Everything comes down onto the police, for sure. Yep. And without a doubt, films and TV programmes play into that.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying every police person is an angel, because they're not. And I'm not saying that, racism is obviously the factor you talk about police. And I'm not saying that there aren't racist police, of course there are. My argument is that there's as many racist teachers, doctors,
absolutely,
judges, as there are police. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you said to a judge, tell me how many people are judges who are of colour, they'd struggle.
Yeah.
They'd literally struggle to name you but 3, right? Whereas you could say to the police, how many police? So, all right, there's this, that,
Yeah.
So the point I'm making is that all of Britain's systems were racially problematic, particularly if you go back in time. Yeah, all of them were, not just the police. And I would argue, I'd go a step further, I would argue that when some aspects were being done in the old days, as I said to you, under the Sweeney type thing, I'd suggest to you that the judges knew it.
Okay.
I'd suggest the judges knew that the police were fitting a fellow up, but they thought, he's a criminal, he's done it.
Yeah.
It's his time to come in. The judges knew that. You see what I mean? So to me, it's not a realistic thing. It's something that we look at. I think there's let's go a step further. I think there's a lot to do with class in it. The police is predominantly a working class body, and I think because it's working class, everybody's happy to hammer them.
Yeah.
When the Grenfell fire happened, I was speaking to a guy who was a fireman, and I said to him, at the end of this, you will be the ones who are found to be wanting. Not the people who put the cladding on, not the people who did a deal to do cheap cladding.
Yeah.
Yeah, none of that. The main thing that will come will be the fire brigade didn't do its job.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you'll get, because the fire brigade's working class and all these other people are connected. Yeah. So, to me, what I would have expected would have been that the first part of any investigation into why Grenfell happened and 70 people lost their lives would have been, how did this cladding get onto this building? Who decided to get this poor cladding? Who tested it? Who realised? No, that's come after the fire brigade bit. Why? So when people have forgotten, now we're going to talk about the cladding. Do you see what I mean? Because now you're hitting people with some power, especially when you're talking central London and Westminster and all those sort of places. But the fire brigade, you can do them all day long because they're working class. And I think that's what we've still got in our country. And I'm going to end on this because you won't know it, but you've been talking now for around about 55, 60 minutes. What you will find is this. Until we sort out this class aspect in Britain, we are not going to get people working to their full potential. In fact, I don't know now who wants to join the police. I mean, why would you join an organisation that day in, day out, people are saying is rubbish?
Yeah, you've got to protect your job.
You protect everything you do. Yeah, absolutely. Why would you? I mean, the commissioner, can you believe this? You've got one person, and I'm going to leave on this, who as far as I know, in the last 120 years, has used the position to rape and kill a woman, right, as a police officer. One person as far as I know, there could be 100, but I don't know. But as far as I know, you've got this one officer who's done that, right? And this one officer's done that, and the whole of the police is bad. You get the commissioner saying, if you feel a threat when an officer stops you, stop a bus driver and tell a bus driver that you're not happy, and it might not. Well, so what she's saying is that a bus driver is more trustworthy than your average policeman. So I'm going to run off to a bus driver because I think the police might be doing something wrong to me. Yeah. How does that work? When you've got Dr. Shipman murdered 120 people.
Yeah, absolutely.
120 people.
Yeah.
Right? In the same week that Sir Everard, and I feel sorry for her, was murdered, one nurse killed 8 children. Right? You heard nothing about it. Right? And millions of people were going getting an injection put in their arm that's total and utter trust, and you don't know what they're putting in it, right? And believe me, it was right to do that. But the point I'm making is that nobody turned around and said, well, Dr. Shipman's killed 120 people, so be careful if you're taking your jab. Do you see what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you're saying.
But one copper does something, next minute, all cops are bad.
Bad, yeah.
Yeah, oh, terrible, all police are bad. Oh, don't get stopped by a police. So and you know this from reality.
It undermines the entire police service.
The entire police service. So you can turn around and say, I'm not stopping for police because I thought he might be not a police.
Yeah, and that's I feel like that's what people will probably use.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And let's face it, one thing that is right, we all know that some of these gangs use the women to carry their kit around for them, their guns and so any woman who's got kit on them just runs off to the next bus driver and says, I was just running away because I thought he wasn't a police, even though he's in full uniform. I thought he wasn't a police. This is nonsense, and the commissioner plays into it.
Yeah.
Instead of saying one bad apple, we've dealt with this one guy, we're dealing with him. Yeah. There may be other officers who are doing things. We accept that. But then what company of 50,000 people isn't? Yeah. Yeah? But instead, and this is the problem, yet still, the government of the day can do whatever
they want. Right. They can have cheese and wine parties.
And nobody's questioning hardly ever what the score is, and then telling you, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, we're dealing with top stuff. So this is where the problem is. It's all about how they're perceived by society. And until we solve this big problem, and I think it is a big problem, we are going to have problems. And I just don't know who joins. I don't, we're talking about the police. Now, and I think the movies and TV plays into that. As you said.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you.
I agree with you there.
How do we change it? I don't know. I think we'd be a little bit more realistic as to what happens in our country and stop trying to copy what happens in the United States. Because with those American figures, could you imagine if 1,055 people... let's put it in context with our size. So they've got 350 million people, we've got 66 million people, so that would be... So let's say in Britain it would be police killing about 300 people every year. Could you imagine?
Yeah.
Shooting dead 300 people every year. Even if it's 250 people every year. Could you imagine?
Even 100. Even 10.
Could you imagine? This would be craziness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those are the people who die.
Yeah.
Not the people who are shot.
That's
and
true.
by the way, that's only the people. So Floyd would not have showed up on those figures because those are the people who were shot.
Yeah.
We're not now talking about people who are strangled, people who are choked, which are many, as you know, chokehold people all the time, all that sort of stuff. So the number of people they must be killing out there,
it's insane.
It's insane, right? But we're looking at it and saying, "Oh, these."
Yeah.
So I leave you with that Top Boy scene. I'm sure the Americans who are watching Top Boy are thinking, hang on, how are they not getting out of that car?
Because in America you're done for.
Yeah. Listen, Jade, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been absolutely insightful. I hope that you get a better understanding of how the portrayals do, well, you know that, how they make a difference themselves. And that I'm hoping others who listen get that understanding like Jade is. I think it's a great subject you brought to the show today, because I think people do need to understand. And if you really do want to know how it functions, watch the fly on the wall stuff and see how the officers have to operate. Like, what was the one you said?
24 hours in police custody. Yeah.
Exactly, something like that. You will see how they have to operate to make it real.
And I'm going to get on to some of them other shows that you suggested.
Super duper. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again next week.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.